Well, let's get started. Greetings and welcome to Community Resilience with Rikki Nadkarni-Longino. Rikki is the founder of Mobile Moon Co-op and the University of Utah Environmental Humanities Graduates Program's first Community Practitioner-in-Residence. This talk tonight contributes to their work in facilitating university and community connections. Thank you for being with us. We're coming to you from Salt Lake City, Utah. We're here on the unceded ancestral territory of the Goshute, Ute, Eastern Shoshone, and Paiute people, and we are utilizing the technology of Zoom, based in San Jose, California, on the unceded territory of the Ohlone people. We also acknowledge that the prosperity we enjoy is based in significant part on the labor of enslaved peoples. We acknowledge all that has occurred to be here tonight. I'm Corey Pike, Administrative Assistant and Graduate Advisor from the University of Utah Environmental Humanities Graduate Program, stepping in for our Community Engagement Coordinator, Brooke Larson. This evening is brought to you by EH at the U of U and Mobile Moon Co-op, and is founded in part with the support of the Andrew D. Mellon Foundation. The session is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. There will be time for questions at the end of Rikki's presentation. Feel free to put them in the Q&A, and I'll monitor the chat as well during Rikki's talk. I'd like to turn this over to Riley Sayers, first-year Environmental Humanities student and Mellon Community Fellow, to introduce Rikki.
Thank you, Corey. Sorry about the delay. I couldn't unmute myself, but yes, my name is Riley. I use they, them, or she, they pronouns. And I'm really excited to be sharing this space with everybody and to introduce Rikki. They're our first practitioner in residence here at the EH program, like Corey said. And they are also a queer community collaborator, herbalist, gardener, organizer, and an amazing friend. I have the privilege of working with Rikki at the Mobile Moon Co-op as a core member. And the Mobile Moon Co-op is a femme queer collective for community care, holistic herbal healing, and empowering ecologies. I hope you all enjoy this talk with Rikki. Thank you.
There we go. Everybody can hear me. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I will share my screen. Let's see. Corey, do you think? Oh, here we go. Share screen. And 1 second, and I'll pull this up. Okay. So the title of this presentation is Community Resilience, Phase Changes, and the Ecology of Home. And I will be happy to share this presentation with you. I'll begin this presentation with a quote by Molly Costello, who is a revolutionary visual artist. The quote is, "Crisis expands our imaginations around what is possible." And so today I would like to welcome you and acknowledge the current crisis of health, community, and capacity that has been created by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I thank each and every one of you for showing up fully and respectfully to this virtual space. I recognize that I live on the occupied lands of Ute, Goshute, Paiute, and Shoshone peoples who were violently displaced and continue to embody remarkable resilience in the face of systematic racism and oppression every day. And I acknowledge and grieve the Earth's wounds due to petrochemical extraction, the depleted soils of industrial agriculture, and the polluted waters of broken connections to our source. And yet, as stated in the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address, we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. And so now we bring our minds together as one, as we give greetings and thanks to each other. and then all together, and now our minds are one. And now I will proceed to acknowledge what is possible. My name is Rikki Nadkarni-Longino, and for the last 3 months, I have acted as the Community Practitioner-in-Residence for the University of Utah's Environmental Humanities program. This position was made possible by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, whose mission is to build just communities where ideas and imagination can thrive. This partnership has created a novel point of connection between the academy and the community, and it has helped build capacity for my own efforts as a community herbalist at the Mobile Moon Co-op and the garden coordinator at the Salt Lake City Public Library, as well as creating opportunities for students to engage with the local community. Next, I will share a quote by Farhad Ebrahimi, who's a climate justice activist. And the quote is, "The biggest thing that I have learned from nature is the importance of relationships. For example, an ecosystem isn't just a list of living things, squirrel, tree, bee, flower. It is the set of relationships between those living things. The squirrel lives in the tree, the bee pollinates the flower. In terms of organizing, this means that a given social movement isn't a list of organizations or campaigns or even individuals. It is the set of relationships between organizations, campaigns, individuals, etc." So I'll start by talking about the Mobile Moon Co-op. The Mobile Moon Co-op is a female and queer collective that aids communities and ecosystems through education, empowerment, and botanical stewardship. So every week, roughly, we host events that correspond with the phase of the moon. The new moon is thematically about intention setting through craft and arts. The first quarter moon emphasizes bodily and spiritual work, yoga, meditation, and dance. The full moon acknowledges collaborative, celebratory, or culmination practices. And the third quarter emphasizes culinary and medicinal skill sets. And this curriculum was developed by one of our members, Zay. We also create herbal products. We are all kind of crafting our herbal skills. And moon boxes are ethically produced local collections of handmade herbal products from our community and for our community. They're offered as subscriptions or one-off products. We also create quarterly zines. So over the course of each season, we collect art, recipes, essays, poetry from the community. And then on the equinoxes and solstices, we release these booklets called zines. And this material also contains kind of our season's milestones and updates. The Mobile Moon Co-op is hosted in a 40-foot school bus, as shown in the photo. And it's on a half-acre farm near the Jordan River. The bus has been converted into an open apothecary and lending library for the empowerment of women and LGBTQ. And importantly, we reserve 30% of our proceeds to donate to an individual or organization within our community. And this is known as our solidarity partner for the month, for the moon cycle. And our membership base is really, those are the people who help us decide who to donate to, who's in need. And then we also go to our members to make critical changes in the organization. This semester, we were able to partner with Riley or Rye Sayers, who's a newly rooted transplant to Utah. They are a self-proclaimed militant organizer for protest and people's protection. They grew up in contempt of agrarian spaces and agriculture because of schooling and socialization that really elevated white supremacy and multidimensional toxicity through rural nationalistic identities, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. But through food sovereignty movements, radicalization, and intersectionality, Rye now finds community and peace in permaculture and landscapes of all kinds. Rye loves restorative justice, community care organizing, and rehabilitation imagination. So we're incredibly grateful to be able to work with this individual. Riley has helped us immensely in undertaking projects on the Mobile Moon Co-op, and their support has really been integral to our growth. So you might ask, why the moon? Well, for one, I'm not the only person who has kind of a primordial connection with this celestial body. The moon controls our tides and impacts the germination of our seeds. Our bodies synchronize with its waxings and wanings, but also the moon's phases are a metaphor for the ways that I see the necessary change in our systems as a globe. If the no moon maybe represents initiation or connection, it gradually becomes more visible and enters its next phase of organization and planning. And then the illumination of the full moon follows as action and kind of enactment. And the third quarter identifies a state of reflection, digestion, and a return back to the beginning. So this cyclical thinking actually kind of exists in contrast to the capitalist model of monotonous growth that results in inevitable exploitation. Furthermore, I want to emphasize that it's not so much about the individual lunar cycles, but rather the change between them. So it's not necessarily the precise moment of the full moon that I feel excited about, but rather the constant flow that is in between. This is a quote by fiction author Octavia Butler, and it's the basis of her fictional religion Earthseed from the novel Parable of the Sower. Everything you touch, you change. Everything you change, changes you. The only everlasting truth is change. God is change. Over the course of this semester, I read the book Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown, who she's a doula organizer and author based out of Detroit, Michigan. And she examines the parable of the sower and this concept in some awe, in a way that I appreciated and resonated with. Octavia said Earthseed would never work as a real religion because it isn't comforting enough. But I find myself faithful. I find Earthseed working for me profoundly. It is growing in me a faith in change, in work as a form of prayer, in seeing what is, in shaping what will be. So all of this is to kind of explain how I perceive cycles and cyclical nature as a system grounded in the future and holding faith in change. This brings me to my next observation, which is within the environmental humanities community. As we grow together, we see kind of elemental genres. Over the course of my time in this department, I was able to connect with students in the thick of a 2-year program. They are a community, much like an ecosystem. Despite this global pandemic, they are resilient, despite the constant reflection on environmental and social destruction. And they, like all of us, are entitled to transformations and discoveries, action and reflection, cycles and transitions. And they, like the elements, have adapted to changing environments and each other. And the elements, like the moon, share cyclical nature, and each element contributes different qualities to systems of life. Water, earth, fire, and wind all play crucial roles in creating the ever-shifting habitats of what we call home. In this next section, I'm going to briefly describe some projects that my colleagues have been working on within the context of an elemental genre. Of course, each project impacts many cycles of nature and public engagement, but I've categorized them in order to make visible these threads of interconnection. Water being an emotional landscape or cycle, earth being a physical one, fire, energetic, and wind, or mental or intellectual. So I'll begin with the water cycle. Condensation, precipitation, retention, and evaporation all over and over again. Water has been closely tied to our emotional landscapes, as emotions are generative, fluid, creative, and vital. So is our emotional health and well-being. Anne Whitehouse is a second-year environmental humanities student, and she's interested in the relationships we have with urban streams and rivers. She is studying a Korean novel about the Cheonggye stream in Seoul, South Korea, for her Master's of Arts thesis. Locally, Anne has written about Salt Lake's City Creek and the Jordan River, and her writing has appeared in Wild Roof Journal and the Palouse Review. Anne grew up along the Sammamish River in Washington State, and she currently lives near the Provo River with her family. So as a cohort, we will be compiling more detailed information into a class zine. So over the course of the next moon cycle, we'll be collecting content such as Anne's essays on urban streams and rivers and compiling them into a booklet that will be available digitally as well as physically. Maya Kobe-Rundio is a first-year environmental humanities student and the graduate fellow at Torrey House Press, which is a local press, printing press. Her research interests include multi-species ethnography, social and environmental justice, and land management and creative nonfiction. Currently, she is helping facilitate a writing workshop series that explores the intersection of gardening, ecology, and social justice. This series is a collaboration between the Environmental Humanities Graduate Program, the Mobile Moon Co-op, and Torrey House Press in consultation with Wasatch Community Gardens. A little information about that. We are hosting this 6-part workshop writing series with various different instructors. So we'll be able to kind of explore our personal and collective stories as they're related to gardening, ecology, and social justice. Each of these will provide a space to reflect, heal, and build skills. Our first workshop is this coming Thursday, and they will continue to happen every 2 weeks on Thursday. Feel free to grab a screenshot of this, and on this slide you can see there's a registration link that is all available, and if you would like to see it afterwards, we can send out a link. It's open to everybody. So for the next section, for the next elemental genre, the earth element is having a strong soil foundation and mycelium that grows into a germination process and then into growth, fruition, reproduction, and then into decomposition. So this is a similar cycle. And in this genre, we will connect it to the physical realm, all things having to do with tangibility, measurability, security, grounding. I connected my work at the Salt Lake City Public Library to this element. I work at the Community Garden and Seed Library. The Community Garden is known as the Plot Community Garden, which is clever because it is a library full of books with lots of plots, but this one is a plot garden. There are 18 garden beds that the community is able to use throughout the course of the growing season. And we also have an edible landscaping plot along 400 South. This is the downtown library. It's very accessible to many people. And the programs that we can provide through the Plot Community Garden really create a lot of access to food, food justice, education, and sovereignty. The other program that I oversee is I catalog, operate, and publicize hundreds of varieties of vegetable seeds. So all of these are available and free to the public. When patrons order seeds, they are encouraged to grow them in local soils, germinate them, bring them to fruition, and then harvest and return the seeds to be redistributed into the community. So this is a project that I feel really strongly about. Seeds are something that everyone should have access to and also know how to use and grow. So every day I learn a little bit more about how to steward these seeds and increase biodiversity. Also, Through the Salt Lake City Public Library, I have had the opportunity to partner with STEM CAP, which is a program that connects youth in custody to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. I've been working with one student named Sam Nelson, who is a teacher, writer, and Master's of Arts candidate. He's interested in helping kids build relationships with plants and trees through the creative adoption of plant perspectives. So Sam and I have been working together to develop a curriculum so that students learn how to grow plants from seed to harvest, with a spirit of creativity, mindfulness, and healing. And these students are at a youth detention center in West Valley City. Sam has really helped me understand what's effective for students in communities where nature is falsely conveyed as absent or elsewhere. And because of his background in teaching and children's literature, I found that his role as a fellow instructor with STEM CAP has been really critical to its cultivation. The next cycle that I wanted to relate is the fire cycle. And so this cycle of kindling, spark, flame, and smolder and back is associated with the energetic landscape. So the following products will have to do with power, social movements, passion, creativity, and vibrancy contributing to our collective resiliency. We begin with Maria Archibald, who organizes regionally and nationally with youth-led climate justice groups, including Uplift Climate and the Power Shift Network. These are both incredible movement-building climate justice organizations. She spent the last 4 years coordinating the Rising Leaders program at the Grand Canyon Trust based out of Flagstaff, Arizona. And it was there that she facilitated political education and community organizing workshops for young environmental justice activists. She hopes to spend her life working with young people and has come to the Environmental Humanities program to deepen her understanding of place-based education and community mobilization. Her thesis asked the question, what mobilizes young people to take action on climate justice? And her research will be used to inform a climate-focused political education program that she's building for local teens. I'm really excited to see kind of what that curriculum looks like, and that will also be included in the zine. I'm really excited about this one too. Maddie Bavley is exploring the power and pleasure of petroleum culture. And she sent me just an excerpt of her work that she will actually be sharing tomorrow as a presentation. So we pleasure in petroleum. It is a pleasure cheap and easy. It is a pleasure indifferent to cause or effect. It is a pleasure predicated on fantasy. Our relationship with petroleum is complicated. It provides us convenience, comfort, and commodity. It also is the cause of our climate crisis. Stephanie Lemanager describes our relationship with petroleum as a bad love, a destructive attachment. Reconfiguring our relationship to our energy systems requires reflecting on our current one, but petroleum is a sticky substance that remains inconspicuous and resists interpretation. Everywhere and everything, it is exceedingly ordinary, often overlooked. As a result of these petroleum pleasure ways, the planet has been drastically altered, disproportionately by some. The consequences, current and coming, are disastrous, deadly, entirely displeasurable. Unraveling our petroleum pleasure ways is requisite to reimagining post-petroleum pleasure ways just and joyful. So thank you, Maddie, for allowing that to be shared. Yeah, just really looking at our culture and kind of different addictions and how the aesthetic of petroleum culture is so, it's hidden in plain view. So the last element that I'll explore is the wind, and kind of thinking about how wind has these phases of stillness and then gathering and then gusting and then passing. Wind has often been identified as a symbol of our mental, intellectual, and even spiritual identities. In meditation and sleep, our minds are still, and as we take in information and experience, we gather memories, and we may experience gales of mental agitation or excitement. And of course, there's floating forgetfulness of a passing storm that ties our minds to the air that we breathe. Jenna Fisher is a first-year student in the Environmental Humanities graduate program. She's currently interning with the National Parks Conservation Association and researching and conducting research on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion in national park visitation management plans. She's noticing whose voices are being heard and whose are being silenced in the world of outdoors, outdoor recreation. And she said that as a young Asian American female, she did a solo through hike of the Colorado Trail, which is almost 500 miles through Colorado's backcountry. As a part of the environmental humanities community, Jenna plays an essential role of addressing issues of representation and inclusion in outdoor spaces. And when I was 18, I also did a 300-mile section of the Pacific Crest Trail. So there's something about being able to depict those experiences and really be able to bring them to communities outside of the norm of what you do see on trail that is so important, and look forward to seeing how that unfolds. Hannah Taub does her research in public lands and indigenous land rights and epistemologies. So she aims to develop a program or a set of programs about indigenous history and culture on Antelope Island and the surrounding Great Salt Lake area, centering on the research question, what is the historical and ongoing legacy of indigenous presence on the Antelope Island region? So such a program doesn't actually exist in that state park now, but it goes all the way back to the Fremont peoples of 900 to 1200 CE, who lived, hunted, and fished in the abundant ecosystem of the region's wetlands. And more recent indigenous communities, including the Goshute and Northwestern Band of Shoshone nations, have made a home in this area. Hannah is also helping to organize the Writers' Workshop series. Doug Sam is a student, he's a first-year student and the Mellon Community Fellow, currently working with the Summit Land Conservancy to implement best practices to decolonize outdoor education and work Indigenous perspectives and voices back into land management. And he also works as an outdoor educator with the MESD Outdoor School in Oregon. His research interests are in Native American and environmental histories in the American West. So you can really see how many students are kind of converging on similar themes and kind of moving in similar directions. And in the interest of time, I have not gone into much detail for any particular student project. Each individual is a work in progress, and each intent has developed over time and so much effort. And each narrative has a long road ahead of it with unforeseen obstacles and flowers to smell and change. And as I mentioned, we will be compiling our collective work into a small booklet, which will be available to anybody. But what I want you to notice is how all of these projects are connected with many filaments and strings and hopes and dreams of a future that cycles naturally. They make obvious the problems of colonial industrial capitalism, and then they present diverse and vibrant alternatives. And to me, this is what community resiliency really looks like. We can see how they exemplify a departure from individualism and into collective value or collective worth. I think about monocrops and industrial agriculture and compare that to ecosystems, natural ecosystems that are thriving and diverse. I think about nitrogen fertilizer that's used to grow the plants that most of us eat and interact with, a single nutrient, versus compost that we generate that is full of teeming life and so many different nutrients, including nitrogen and carbon and all kinds of different features. And going deeper into more of a social landscape, I think about conversations around allyship and how much branding or performative allyship has happened, especially in the last year, in contrast to specific reparations or contributions to communities in need that have suffered at the hands of colonial settler culture and colonization. And so as I kind of wrap this up and bring it home, I would invite you to wonder, how are you embodying this change, and how are you resisting the change in order to fall into a cycle that feels lunar or earthbound or windy or watery or fiery. And I hope that you can bring that question to the front when it comes up. And I will leave you with this quote by Robin Walt-Kimmerer, author of Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. Know the ways of the ones who take care of you, so that you may take care of them. Introduce yourself. Be accountable as the one who comes asking for life. Ask permission before taking. Abide by the answer. Never take the first, never take the last. Take only what you need. Take only that which is given. Never take more than half, leave some for others. Harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Use it respectfully. Never waste what you have taken. Share. Give thanks for what you have been given. Give a gift in reciprocity for what you have taken. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever. So I will now open it up for any questions that you may have. If there are any. Any questions or comments?
Thank you so much, Rikki. I'm doing my best to unmute everyone so they have a chance to speak up if they'd like, or if you'd like to ask in the chat. I see in the chat that Nalini has asked, how might academic scientists contribute to this connection? Or I put a word in Nalini's mouth, contribute to this, she asks.
I think that's a really good question. Most of the quotes that I used were from activists or artists or more philosophical authors, but I think that it is important to kind of back things up with scientific evidence when it comes to natural cycles. And I really think that science is an expression of these cycles, and really a testing of like, well, is it really true? What can we learn from ecosystems? And so to be able to simultaneously embody or kind of understand those cycles while also being able to probe into that and ask questions and kind of come up with hypotheses is sort of the scientific way, or the contributions that I could see academic scientists moving in these spheres.
Thank you. There are a few questions in the Q&A that I'll ask. The first one from Bridget. Have you seen a change in community response or involvement with the garden plot since you've started it?
So I will be honest in saying that this is my 1-year anniversary of being the garden steward at the library, and I basically became the garden steward like as everything was shutting down. So unfortunately, last year we had to not have any community gardeners on site, just because the library is such a central location and we didn't know enough about the virus to safely bring, 18 different people into the same plot. So instead, last year we grew out all of the garden beds and donated it to the Women's Resource Center. And we had a lot of engagement with the seed library last year. We had over 700 orders that we were just mailing to people because nobody was able to come on site. So a lot of engagement there. This year, the community garden, we had 30 people sign up. 30 people on the wait list. So we had 18 people. We offered the garden beds to the people who were going to garden last year. Several of them couldn't do it this year. So there was a lot of interest in the community gardens. And I think one of the biggest shortages for people when it comes to gardening is having access to land and water to be able to grow. So.
Someone from the audience has asked, can you describe how the Seed Library partnership started? Beautiful talk, thank you.
Oh, thank you. How did the Seed Library start? It was a project actually of my former colleague at the library, Emmett Wilson. Seed libraries have been around for a very, very long time, and I think they're really essential parts of communities, not just agrarian communities, but also just any community that wants to have biodiversity. And Emmett and I had actually gone to school at the university together and worked at the edible campus gardens. And we had always kind of talked about like, oh, we should have a little, like a bird house, but it opens up and there's little seeds in there that people can just take. But then when Emmett started working at the library, they thought, well, we're a library, we should have seeds accessible and available. And there were enough donation channels of seeds that they were able to tap into that they launched it. And there was a photo in the presentation. It was a seed catalog or a card catalog for the library that the drawers that pull out actually all have seed packets in them. So I think housing seed libraries at a book library is just very natural. But we started it about 4 years ago now? Yeah, so it was 4 years, and Emmett and I kind of actually worked together to create the seed library, and that was before I worked at the library. So yeah, and also it was incredible that the library approved it and kind of sent it through to become such a great program.
Yes, I see another question from Nalini, and she wonders what segments of our population are currently least served. These are excellent questions from Nalini.
Questions. I would say there are, thinking about intersectional climate justice, I feel like the conversation has shifted from, at least in my experience with environmental justice, from like, oh, we have to save the planet, to really understanding this question of how are populations impacted, because oftentimes the people who have access to the most resources are actually polluting the most and causing proportionally a lot more harm to our environment. So shifting the conversation to being able to speak more about equity and how do we serve the most marginalized or oppressed populations And it's really, I think that working with the incarcerated is really important. There's a lot of different groups that are underserved or not served for various reasons. But a reason that I did get interested in working with STEM CAP was because it feels like prisoners are a growing population who have very few rights. So to be able to do the work with Sam and others in the STEM CAP program has really brought to light like how we can get into places where there isn't a lot of respect, service, or access to nature. We understand wild nature. I mean, if you look at the demographics, I think unsheltered or homeless individuals are often underserved. People without addresses, who don't have credit cards or access to computers, are just in much more difficult positions. Undocumented individuals, just general Black and Indigenous people of color, like especially in this country, we have such a history of oppression. And so I couldn't necessarily pinpoint one exact population that is currently least served, because I think it's all sort of enmeshed in a culture of, systematic industrial growth that leaves people out. So I think going to the slide about collective worth versus individual growth or ecosystems over monocrops, it's to me, I think the systematic shift to cyclical understanding is really just making the gap between yourself and those underserved, least served populations smaller through compassion and just redistribution of resources. So, thank you.
And you were just speaking about many things, but you mentioned Sam, and he wonders what your favorite plant is at this moment in time.
Oh my.
Could you show what you have in the moon box behind you also?
Yes, absolutely. So this is a moon box. This is this month's moon box. We have so it's called the Viridian Equinox tea, and it has lemongrass and butterfly pea, which like they really make this beautiful color together. The butterfly pea is very blue, and then the lemongrass, it has CBD leaf and cardamom in it as well. And so it's this like very vibrant colored tea. This is a bath salt made by Eliza. These are seeds grown by Grand Prismatic Seed Company, who share the Moonstead and the Half Acre Farm. This is a handmade soap by one of our community members, and it smells so good. And then, okay, I think this is my favorite plant right now. This is Devil's Claw, and it just looks like an amazing like little dancing crawfish or something. And this is the seed pod. So the seeds are actually inside here. But in the summertime when they're growing, they're covered in this incredible kind of velvety, fleshy skin. So these are also, you get one of these in a moon box this month. So maybe any other questions?
Yes, there's one from Katerina, and she asks, based on your experience as a gardener and activist, what changes would you like to see as we move past the pandemic? That's a broad question.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I feel like I have so many visions for the future. I love just seeing what happens when grass lawns turn into gardens, and not only the landscape, but the people. I think there's this kind of return to some some important cycles within us when we start to figure out that we can grow our own food or our own herbal teas. And then with that, I think comes the growth of community and a greater understanding and compassion for people around us. So, I mean, it's really hard, especially living in Utah, where you go up I-15 and you see the vast industrial extraction of, coal trains and just smelters and a lot of petroleum culture. But then to be able to go to the gardens of my friends and the Ogwai People's Garden on the west side, there's so many amazing garden projects. And just when people realize that they can start feeding the soil and then feeding themselves, and it's sort of this feedback loop that I just am sort of obsessed with. So yeah, that's really my hope is the diversification and awareness, the growing awareness of people to be able to reclaim sovereignty over themselves and their food.
And we're back to the devil's claw. John says we have we got devil's claw seeds. Any danger of invasiveness? Or I'm putting words into the chat. Should we be careful not to let seeds spread?
That's a good question. They are native and they are non-invasive. So I don't think you should be too worried about letting them spread. They are a little spooky looking. It's like, oh, I wouldn't want them all. Mm-hmm. But no, they're a great high desert plant. But you might be able to do some research and prove me wrong. As far as this year in our garden, they kind of died back and haven't come up. So I think they need some help to be able to keep growing.
There are some great comments in the chat. And earlier, Anna said that she suggested that she'd like to emphasize that folks with disabilities are also vastly underserved, expected to work or otherwise earn their rights to health and wealth, and lack of adequate health care as well. There are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge. Thank you for catching that, Anna.
Nalini asks, what is the long-term vision of EH with respect to community groups after the grant is over? And that is a question that I would like to turn over to Brooke and Katerina if they'd like to contribute to that answer. The one thing I will say is that these connections that our students and that Rikki and our future community practitioners in residence and Brooke, our community engagement coordinator, these are not, we hope that they are lasting connections that we make in the community, that we continue to create these connections between the university and our community as best we can, whether that's in terms of partnerships and funding and work. But would anyone who's more knowledgeable about this like to answer that? Thanks, Nalini. That was nice.
I mean, I think it's just been a really excellent opportunity for all parties involved. Personally, I know that the connection between EH and the library, for example, and the Mobile Moon Co-op will be lasting. So, and I look forward to seeing what future practitioners bring to the table as well.
Are there any other questions from the from our participants and from our audience and anyone else? I'm doing my best to monitor if I don't I may have overlooked something. I hope I have not. Rikki, is there anything else you would like to add?
I just really appreciate everybody coming through, showing up, and sharing this evening. Last night was the full worm moon, so it's exciting to be able to kind of have this culmination moment with everybody.
Well, we thank you very much for your time, and we thank our participants for attending, and we invite you to follow the Mobile Moon Co-op's websites, think about becoming a member, visit the Moonstead, follow the Mobile Moon Co-op on social media. Please do the same for EH. I'll post a link in the chat. I may have done that earlier. That talks about the garden workshop, a writing workshop that's coming up, and some of our other events. We thank you very much for the evening, or for your time, and enjoy the rest of this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.